Welcome back to the You Can Too podcast. On today's show, we have Jennifer Cohen on the show. She is an entrepreneur, a best-selling author, a brand strategist, an international speaker, a podcaster, an advocate for living a bold life. Honestly, about Jen's accomplishments, they could be my entire notes, truthfully. And I want to jump into Jen's story. I know that the first moment for you, I feel like the boldness started was when you were 17 and Keanu Reeves, that story. I feel like you could jump through that 1,000 times, but I'd love for you to give a brief overview of what happened in that moment for you that switched your worldview, that changed the trajectory of your life? Because it seems like everything changed from that moment on, it seems.
Well, I think what changed was the reality for me that, anything is possible if you at least you never know. First of all, you never know unless you try. That's the first part. And that it really is a question of being, it's not even a question. I believe that it was the place where I noticed that being bold was actually the secret sauce to being successful. It wasn't being smart, it wasn't being talented. It was about just the fact of the sheer ability just to put yourself out there and ask for what you want. And that superseded everything else. And at that moment in time is when I realized that and I acted accordingly. So I always attempted I made bold moves for everything, and I never let the possibility of no stand in my way. And my philosophy was really, and always has been, even before that moment that you're talking about, was always like a why not me attitude,
Mhm.
and what is the worst that can happen. And obviously you're somebody who believes in that too, right? Because here you are at 19 years old doing these things that most 19-year-olds, quite frankly, aren't doing, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so that to me was what it really it was a very pivotal, because it taught me that life lesson.
I know you grew up in Manitoba, right? And it was
Manitoba, yeah.
Manitoba. I have a friend that lives there, and I can, yeah,
And where?
sorry.
Winnipeg? In
Winnipeg, yeah,
Winnipeg?
yeah, yeah.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
yeah, and I think growing up there, I know for me, growing up in upstate New York, it's small, and so it made me have this mindset towards this can't be it. Like this can't be everything. Do you feel like that had to be an ingrained belief for you for why you had to have this bold mindset, or where do you think that originated from to begin with?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think that I always had big dreams.
Mm.
To do what exactly, I don't know, but I always wanted to live a life where um, I went for things that were bigger than what I was in the purview, or in the place I was, right? So like my a whole thing is, I did come from a small town. Now there's great things about that. Like I would never change the fact that I grew up in a small town. Like it's all
Mm.
relative, because it gave me a sense of values and core beliefs that you usually can't, usually not all, you can't get. You can, but it's not as common in places where I live now in LA, But
Yeah.
so I'm really happy I was given, I grew up there, but I wanted more in my life than what I think that Winnipeg, Manitoba would be able to provide. Like I said, I had always had big dreams, and that was part of it. And like the idea is that no matter what you are, like I think that you can have a big, it depends what success means to you. And my definition of success isn't about money necessarily. It's about living a life that is fulfilling and satiating in lots of different buckets, right? It's about having meaningful relationships. It's about like having a career that I actually want to do. And it's about
Mm.
just living a life that's much more that I self actualize in, where I'm allowed to be who I am in it. And that is about creating it and designing it. You can't leave it to the outside world to curate what you want for yourself. A lot of times what happens is people acquiesce, and they kind of are okay with what's available to them, right? And to me, that's just not the way I wanted to live my life. I was always someone who wanted to chase what I wanted, and not just
Mhm.
accept what was given to me. And like I said, and design a life that was much more, um, I guess, curated to like what I wanted to be. And so for that, it meant being bold, and I was bold time and time again. And if I can tell anybody anything, it's not like the good news is it's not rocket science. It's not something that you have to be born with. You don't have to be born bold. You just have
Mhm.
to. Boldness is a skill like anything else, and you have to just practice it, and you have to just have an idea of where you want to be and what you want in life, not even have the exact destination, but have a direction and then just act. And things happen when you put yourself out there, put yourself in uncomfortable situations, put yourself in places where you don't necessarily belong. That's when things actually happen for yourself. And so that's the message that I kind of put out there in the world, I hope.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job at it. You're doing a great job at it. I love that the aspect of going on in a direction and not really focusing on the results. I think for me, like when I started this podcast, I started in my car, funny enough. Like I said, I told you it was 2 years ago. Wasn't able to do any kind of interviews at the time. And I started this in my car because I was focused on, I know that in 10 years from now, I want to be speaking with people like Jen or however long it's going to take. So let me just at least get in that direction. I know you talk about the 10% target. I'd love for you to dive into what that looks like because I think that that mindset can serve so many of my listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have this whole philosophy of this idea of this whole 10% target. And what it is, it means basically making 10 attempts at whatever you want most in life. You just pick one thing, right, to begin with, because people always say, like, well, where do I begin? Well, pick one thing and then make 10 attempts at it. And there's a few reasons why. Number one, most people don't make any attempts, right? Almost nobody makes two attempts. So if you're somebody who is putting yourself out there, making more than that attempt, like making more than those two attempts, the
Mm-hmm.
chances of something actually working out for you are that much greater, just because of the sheer lack of competition alone, right? But also, it also teaches you the power of resilience and accepting failure, right? So if you know going into something that you're going to make 10 attempts at something, so you're going to, that will mean that you will have to fail, fall, and get back up. It gives somebody, it desensitizes that feeling of failure for you. So it's more also about the process of like that desensitization of that feeling of failure that people fear so much. People don't do what they want to do or go after what they want is because they're so scared of failing and so scared of what other people think or so scared of there's just have so much self-doubt. So if you can work out that issue off the cuff by practicing that failure, it makes life much easier where it's you get better and better at getting right back up again and trying again. And usually, even if you don't get that thing, because that's really even not the goal, you probably won't get that thing, it opens up other opportunities that you never even knew existed by just going down that path, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of my, actually, almost all of my best successes in life came from things that I failed at, but then down the road, contacts I made or things that I became, cognizant of came to fruition down the line, right? And so to me, that's why it's so important to put yourself out there, make these attempts because of the fact of all those reasons I just said.
It's so powerful. A reframe for me that was really powerful growing up was changing my mindset from failure to feedback, because if I seen it as feedback, I would seek it, and then it would allow me to go, okay, if
Mm,
it's feedback, then I'm like, that's the next failure is my opportunity to learn more so that I can go to the next thing and continue to move forward.
right. And
And
you said something that's very true, which is it's a reframe, right? Like all of
mhm,
this stuff is a reframe. That's why I'm saying like none of this truly is like rocket science or like the panacea. It's about how do you package it to land and make sense to somebody, right?
Hmm.
And everything is also a reframe in your brain, right? Like if you can think of something differently where you're not stuck in these loops and ruminating in these loops of bad negative
Yeah.
self-talk, and you change the way your perspective on something, it changes everything else in life, right? Like if that's why to me the reframe wasn't always about looking at somebody I admire, being like, wow, well, I would, like I wish, or, they're so lucky. That
Hmm.
reframe for me is like, well, why not me? Like if it can happen to that person, why can't it happen to me? And like the reality and the truth, the hard truth really is there's not that much of a distinction and difference between me and that other person. The only real big difference is that they believed in themselves maybe more and attempted and tried. And they tried over and over again. That's the only difference, right? Like they didn't give up, and they didn't see themselves as the barrier, which most people end up doing. Most people see themselves as the barrier to entry, that they are not good enough. And like I see it all the time on my own podcast, and I've interviewed everybody. And I'm living in a place where I meet the biggest and the best. And quite frankly, when you peel back the curtain a little bit, they're no one's different. Everyone's the same. It's just like that.
Hmm.
The only difference is that things worked out for them because they put themselves in positions for things to work out for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's why with this podcast, it was like a no brainer. It's like I'm connecting with people that I are in a position that I want to be in. I'm building my brand at the same time. And it's like there's so much to lead to. Even if I failed, quote unquote, in it, there's an opportunity to succeed in it. And I think for so many of us, we don't think, how can I put myself in a position to succeed, even if I were to quote unquote fail based on what other people think of what failure looks like. And that's why I said earlier, like our missions are aligned in so many ways, because you think, why not me? And the mantra that I told myself growing up, because I think self-doubt, something that's just so many of us deal with, was the mantra was like, you can too. I would see, I think of Roger Bannister for some random reason, was the 4 minute mile. We look through this paradigm of the world of this is how the world is, that there's this limit that that's placed upon us, that this is how the world is. And then when someone breaks it, you realize that that's not how the world really is. And so I think that there's some beliefs that we have around whether it's the world or boldness specifically that I think hold us back from creating a better, more rich life that we can actually want to create. What would you say are some beliefs that we have around boldness that hold us back?
Like you said, self doubt's a big one, right?
Hmm.
And we're very caught up on what people will think about us. We don't do a
Hmm.
lot of things because we're so scared of how we're going to be judged. And that, funnily enough, most people aren't. People are so concerned with their own self, they're not even paying attention to you that much, right? They may judge you for 2 minutes, maybe, and then they
Yeah.
move on to their own self, right? And like again, the fear. People are so scared of not having the right skill set, the right education, the right talent. And at the end of the day, like all of that stuff is it's helpful for sure. But you can have all of those things and then not act and not be persistent and resourceful. And guess what?
Hmm.
It doesn't matter, right? Like I put way more uh, weight on grit, boldness, resourcefulness, persistence, tenacity than I do in all those other things. If you want to be a doctor or you need to want to be a lawyer or you want to be a profession where you need an education and go through those steps to succeed, absolutely. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to set up your own path, or if you have an area or an interest in something, I don't even know what, pick it. You know, the truth of the matter is, it requires all those other things to be successful. You know,
Yeah. And you're someone that really is a very resourceful person where you've created your own avenues, you've created your own jobs even. I'd love for you to dive into how you think about creating opportunities for yourself, because in many areas of life we expect opportunities to show up at our door, or we expect for a lane to show up and the path to be clear, but you've created opportunities for yourself in multiple different areas where they've continued to compound on one another, and I find that really profound.
Thanks. I do think that a lot of opportunities come from curiosity. You
Hmm.
know, I think that being curious is extremely important. I got most of my great opportunities because I was more interested in being interested than interesting. And I
Yeah.
asked a lot of questions. And that's how you learn. That's how you find about you learn about opportunities, you learn about things that you otherwise would have no idea about by asking a lot of questions. And it is the open, like, to me, curiosity is the gateway to opportunities and to communication, to everything really. And if you are someone who is not curious, I would suggest that you try to become curious, because that is how you figure things out. I mean, the reality is you don't know what you don't know, and the only way to learn those things is to be interested in talking to people and asking a lot of questions and reading a lot of materials. Right, like that to me is
Hmm.
the greatest teacher alive. So that's really how I think curiosity is a really important piece of this.
Yeah.
And
And I
another
think,
thing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, another thing is, what you have going for you, right? Like, I think youth and naivete are so important, right? Because,
Yeah.
the more experience you have, the more set in your ways you become. And like when
Hmm.
you don't know something and you don't know how hard a path is to go down and forage it, and you are kind of wide eyed and bushy tailed, so to speak, you're much more apt to try something. And so I think that might not, like, a lot of it has to do with the naivety of something. So like if people can get back to that like childlike state, when you're
Hmm.
little, you'll attempt to, like, you walk, you fall, you get back up, blah 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 blah. People get more and more set and scared of doing things once things didn't work out for them. So
Hmm.
if they can harness that quality, that naivete, it is so helpful in going down that path of wherever you are you're trying to go to and trying something.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've been able to hold that within yourself as your career has expanded?
Yeah, but I think it also gets harder and harder. I have to remind myself, right? Like, I think, I'm so my brain now has, like, the neuroplasticity in my brain has become so used to
Wired a certain way. Yeah.
is wired now to just, like, I'm so comfortable with, like, no's. I'm so
Hmm.
comfortable with, like, failure. I'm so comfortable with, rejection, that, like, it's like water off the duck's ass, as they say. It doesn't
Yeah.
bother me anymore. So naivety to me is not as useful, because I know how it could go through, but it doesn't stop me. But it does stop a lot of people. Like, I know you're like 19 years old, but there's a lot of people who think that, oh, they're 30 and now their time is up. They can't attempt. They can't try to do something different. They can't pivot. They can't live the life that they actually saw themselves living in their head. And the reality is you can you can start again at 30 or 35, 40, 45. Like, there's no time limit, right? Like, people put these own barriers in their life for
Mhm.
when and how and when why they should, or how they should live. But that's
Yeah.
that's self-imposed. So that's about the reframe too, right? Like, if you change the way you frame that in your brain to believe, time and age and all those other things shouldn't stop you from starting. It should
Not at all.
actually propel you to start, because time is getting your time is becoming less and less. So
Mhm. It's that urgency, and for me, like losing family growing up, it was the urgency. I'm young, and it was the urgency of like, even though I have all of this time, I perceive life as though I don't have tomorrow. And so if I don't have tomorrow, those no's, those all of those experiences, the failures, they don't, it's like water, right? Like it falls off and it's moving on to the next thing. And it's exciting. And those things are the things that inspire me to move on to, the next interview, the next experience. I know that you talk about the bold of directors, and I'd love for you to dive into what that looks like, because as you speak about, so much of this is resourcefulness, so much of this is believing in yourself, so much of this is reframing so much. But I think so many of us don't have people around us that are in a position that we want to get to. So how can we start surrounding ourselves with those kind of people? I mean, even for you, like, you've surrounded yourself with so many different people in so many different industries where you have the resources. But for people that are not in that position, where do they start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're right. So a big piece of this is surrounding yourself with people, or with people that want to see you win and succeed, right? And unfortunately, a lot of times we don't have that luxury. We have people around us who want to kind of keep us down for their own reasons, right? Like,
Yeah.
how to squash a big dream is tell it to a small-minded person, right? Like, you tell
Yeah.
somebody something, they have their own reasons for talking you out of something. There's also something called Schadenfreude. Have you heard of this?
I feel like I have. It's ringing a bell, but I couldn't recite it to you.
Okay,
So
so
you can.
Schadenfreude is this idea that people, it's about somebody who gets pleasure from someone else's misery. And
Yes.
right, and so there's a lot of truth in that. That's why the whole saying, like, misery enjoys company, right?
Hmm.
A lot of people want to see you where they, like, don't want to see you get beyond where they have been, because
Yeah.
it reflects badly onto where they stalled in their life, right? And so someone has to be very cognizant of who and what they're telling to what, and who they're spending their time with, especially if they have big dreams and they have a lot they want to grow, right? So this to me is like, you are a sum of the five people that you are around. Now, if you don't have the luxury of having this around you, the one good thing about social media, the one good thing is you're only a DM away from finding people who you believe can be some part of that board of directors, finding people who are positive resources to you, and positive, who could be a positive outlet, a mentor to you, or
Hmm.
or a group of people that you can help. So the idea behind it, building your board of directors, is finding people who are like-minded, who also who want to see you succeed, and you guys help each other. That's why there's the good thing about there's tons of masterminds that people can join, different communities and different tribes and clubs and whatever else, where you can find people who are similar, not necessarily similar, they have the same exact goal as you, no, but who have goals and who have things that
Hmm.
they want to pursue and they want to succeed at. And this is where you guys can really bounce ideas off of each other, help each other win, help each other elevate. And you find these things by, once you have an area of interest, you'd be surprised. There are lots of different social groups, like I said, social media, other ways. Once you have an idea, things will become much easier for you to find. If you're discerning of who you don't want to be around, the right people will present themselves. But you do it by having the curiosity and having the resourcefulness of putting yourself out there, and and like contacting people. It's not going to just come to you because you visualize it. It's going to
Yeah.
happen by you wanting to figure this out and then having that goal in mind.
Yeah. I can't express how many people have reached out to me asking how I've gotten people on the podcast. And it's like, send a DM,
Exactly.
dude. You reach out.
Exactly.
You do exactly what you think you should do, and that's exactly what it is. And I think for most things in life, the mindset that I live by is that life is simple. It isn't easy. Most things we know what we need to do, but we just always find a way to overcomplicate the process, or we make it harder on ourselves because we feel like it needs to be hard. So we create this limit on ourselves where we shouldn't go higher than this, and that goes back to a lack of self belief within yourself. We talk so much about boldness, but there has to be areas of time where you go into a point where you're not feeling so confident. I know Mark Wahlberg, that experience when you were out to dinner, that was a moment in time where it wasn't the time. It wasn't the time for you to show up the best self. So like, what do you do when you're not feeling so confident, when you're not feeling so bold? How do you get back to that 100% Jen that you want to show up as?
Well, I think that's a great point because I think that we're never all 100% every day, right? And we're going to have peaks and valleys and lulls and all that other stuff. But I think what happens is if we are normally consistent, we can get back to there eventually. But I think
Mm.
what we do is you call on those bold of directors basically. So that's why it's important to have people around you who are really good reminders and help elevate you and pick you up when you don't have that. And also, I think I do. I exercise. If you want something more concrete, I believe exercise is a really important piece and strategy for overall success, both personally and professionally, because it changes your brain waves, it changes your mental state, it changes your focus, it changes your mood. And so when I don't feel that way, I get up and I start moving my body. And every single time I've done that, it's like I said, it tweaked and changed my mood, my mindset to get me out of that like feeling to then
Mhm.
take action.
Yeah. Yeah. The getting it in movement is something that like I'll force myself to do. Getting like 10,000 steps in a day has been something that I've been prioritizing. I never really feel like doing it, but every single day I do it, I've never felt more like I have more energy. And it's funny because I'm doing more than I've ever done. So it's like those times when you prove to yourself that you can do something, you set out to do something in the gym is genuine proof. It's like it's physical. I said I'm gonna do something, you do it, confidence boost.
Yeah.
And you've been in that area of expertise, and so it makes sense that you go down that path. Outside of that, are there any habits? Good.
Yeah, no, I was going to say just to kind of stay on that because I think it's
Mm,
exceptionally important
yeah.
is going for a walk. Forget about even the gym. I think going and changing your environment is
Mm,
really, really important to like get your brain right, right? Like a lot of this stuff starts with not a lot. Everything starts with your brain, right? Like I'm not
yeah.
telling people to work out because I'm asking them to like, to get a great ass. I'm telling them to work out because it helps them retrain and rejig bad negative thoughts in their head. It gives them a sense of purpose. It gives them a sense of focus. And what you just said was on point, which is that not only when you're working out, all those things happen, but it gives you energy. So energy begets energy. So when people say, "Oh, I
Mm,
don't have, I'm too tired, I can't do it," what they don't seem to understand is that like that's exactly when you need to do it because that's how you actually bring more energy into your life and become more productive. So like the best productivity hack that I've ever found was exercise for productivity. I get way more done in a day when I exercise versus when I said I'm too tired and I can't do it. Other strategies that you're asking me for, yes, have set habits and routines that you stick to keep you on point. So to exercise is one of my big ones, right? But I like to leave room. Like I don't want to have. I think that your brain only has a certain amount of like ability to process a lot of brain power. So
mm,
I like to put a lot of things on autopilot. So like I make my breakfast and put that on autopilot. I have the same breakfast every day because it puts things on autopilot where I can focus on other things. I exercise in the morning because it puts things. So there's certain. I think having a very strong morning routine and having even an even better night routine keeps people on point to win the day. And it's all about that, right? It's all about time management, being effective with the time you have, being putting yourself in a place to feel confident and to win the day. And the only way to do that is to number one, follow through on the promises you make with yourself and to create structure where structure is important so you can actually proceed and win.
yeah. Yeah. Gym is the first thing I do before I put my shoes on and I'm immediately running out of the door.
What
And
time do you
I
wake up in the morning?
5:30 to 5:45 most days, if I'm honest.
Wow. And you go to the gym at that time? But
Yeah, I've made it so I used to go to the gym around like evening, and I believe that I was an evening gym kind of goer,
yeah.
and that isn't true whatsoever because I've gone. I wear contacts. I put my contacts in, and I am out of the door. I give myself no time, and I'm on to the gym. I get home from the gym, and then I get into my day. But I make the same breakfast every single morning as well. It's like just getting into these habits.
What do you
I go on a
make?
walk. Go ahead.
What do you make for breakfast?
Most days I make all right, so I eat too many eggs. That sounds crazy,
No, I
but
know, me too. I'm the same
I,
way.
I eat way
It's
too many eggs. So
terrible.
I'm trying to cut down on the
Me
eggs, but
too.
it's usually eggs in some kind of turkey bacon. Um but I was eating way too many eggs and now I'm cutting down. So eggs, egg whites, that's usually it with some turkey bacon and then yeah, but the gym first thing in the morning, it I truly believe that getting that thing done first thing no matter like regardless of anything else, I feel better than anything else. It's the hardest thing done first thing in the day, and it makes me feel 100% for the rest of the day. And it's funny because you talked about walks. Most days on my story on Instagram, I will post go on a walk because when I was younger, I struggled sleeping. And the only thing that I would do, just in general, I was a curious person. And whether kids made fun of me or whatever it was, I would go on walks so much because that was me just being with myself, building my relationship with myself, or when I couldn't sleep or whatever that looked like. And walks have been so impactful
That's
for me. So
great.
I'm so glad that you brought that up still to this day.
Walks are the
Um,
best. I think walking is very underrated as
yes.
a tool. Walking to me is like a great tool to clear your head, to get a lot of great ideas. I
Hmm.
think just a movement. I'm a big believer in just moving your body as much as you can.
What has been the lesson that's taken you the longest to learn?
That's a good question, actually. Um, I guess that some things are just not meant to be. You know, like sometimes you can push really hard and want something really badly, and it just doesn't happen, no matter how bold you are, no matter how badly you want it. And I think sometimes that's hard for me to accept because my entire message is, rah, rah, go after it, blah, blah, blah. Uh, but I think that to me is a hard one to accept because certain things. Um, and I have to really kind of remind myself and train my brain. I'm not there yet. I'm still working on it. I am a little bit better than I used to be. That if that sometimes not having something that you want work out for you is because something down the road would never be able to happen if that thing worked out for you. But that's a
Hmm.
hard pill to swallow, right? That means both. That's not just work. I'm talking personal life too, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a big one. I think that it's like I have to learn that lesson over and over again that no matter, you could be the most resourceful person in the world, the most gritty person in the world, and still something doesn't work out. And that's okay. Like not getting something is okay too, even with all that other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to see like I said earlier, like simple, life simple, not easy. Another mindset that I live by is that I don't know. And something that I think we attach to is, especially this kind of lines with your mission, is we overthink so much. And this is why the boldness aspect is so important. When you're naive and you just take action, it's the overthinking gets out of the way. But something that we don't take into perspective is that when we feel as though something isn't working out in the moment, we don't really know what that's going to lead to in the future. And so if we have this belief that we know what's going to happen, we're going to overthink the future and we're going to be disappointed and stressed out and overwhelmed that what's going on didn't work out as we wanted it to, but we don't know what it's going to lead to in the future. So
We don't.
really, I'm really grateful that you bring that in. Is there something that you're still trying to prove to yourself?
I'm trying to. Yeah, I mean, listen. I think every day there's something I'm still trying to prove to myself, right? Like I think that um, you know, as much as you say like, oh, you've done so much and you've had so much success in this or that, the other, you know, I don't, I, and I think a lot of people say this, like, I don't
I'm,
see it that way. I'm like, I
of
don't
course.
think so. Like, I don't feel like I've even come close or I've even hit like I haven't even skimmed the surface of what I can do. And so that also is something that that's a work in progress, to like kind of like to be much more I guess to kind of look at my situation, like, God, you know what, like being kind of being grateful and happy that what I have done, right? Because it's like people
Hmm.
who are very type A personalities, it's always about the next thing, the next thing, and the next thing, instead of like stopping and smelling the roses and being taking in what you have done.
Yeah.
So there's like this, that type of thing is very difficult for me, and I'm aware of it. Like it's not that I'm not aware of it. I'm very cognizant of it, but I think it's always a struggle that I think a lot of people would deal with. I think that right now in the world, in the zeitgeist we live in, there's all these like really popular, trendy hashtags like gratitude and gratefulness and like self acceptance and like
Yeah.
self love and all these things. But a lot of times people say it, but they don't really mean it. They say it because they know they should say it. But really, once they hit stop and, and move on to their actual life,
Yeah.
they're not really embodying those things. And, one thing about me is I'm incredibly honest and self effacing, and I am what I am. And I know that I am aware of my weaknesses, and that's probably one of them. And
Hmm.
I need to get better at that, as
Is
most
there,
people do.
yeah, and I'd love to like dive in a little bit deeper into that because that's something that I think as entrepreneurs in general, we definitely struggle with. Like you said, type A people is we're always looking to the next thing. We're always looking at what we could do instead of what we have done. And so throughout your journey, how have you changed your relationship with that? Or how what are some habits that you've incorporated? What are some mindset shifts? What are some things that you've kind of shifted within your life to be able to enjoy your life, but also be able to strive at the same time, if that makes sense?
I think that taking opportunities sometimes, like not, spending more time with my kids. I mean, listen, I have two kids now. I'm married. It's the whole thing, and taking more time to enjoy life.
Hmm.
And there's no such thing as balance. I'm not a person who
Me
believes in
either.
balance. There's going to be times when like there's everything is like hardcore in one thing or hardcore in another,
Yep.
depending on what I'm working on.
Yeah.
But also, I think realizing and spending more time with things that are more truly meaningful than just things that are conquests and conquests for me personally, which is like being with my kids more, taking vacation. I just came back from Croatia with my girlfriend. We went on a biking trip. And most times I would put things like that off. I'd be like, no, I have to get
Yeah.
this done, that done, and like and keep on like powering through, but and overthink it and be like, no, or like talk myself out of why I shouldn't go. But
Yeah.
I just went and I didn't overthink it. I went on this experience because life is about experience. That's one of the life lessons that I've really learned, that life is more about experience than things. And, at the end of the day, those are the things that you're going to really go back to and remember that you did. You're not going to remember about this deal or that deal or what you did, what haggling you did with this or that. It's about like the experiences that you've had, the relationships that you've built. And truly, the best relationships are built on experiencing things together. And to
Right.
me, that's like holistically what I feel success is. Success isn't just about making money and doing a deal and starting a company. That's like one sliver of a pie. But
Yeah.
if you forget about all the other stuff, like I said, like satiating, fulfilling relationships, and like building on your personal life and giving back in other ways, then it's all for nothing. And so to really kind of be much more holistic and full bodied in what I'm doing is really important now.
Last question I ask every guest is what belief are you currently unlearning?
Hmm. Well, I kind of feel like one of the current beliefs I'm currently unlearning is that, let me think. Well, didn't I just say it a little bit that it's really important to kind of find happiness and fulfillment in lots of pockets of life,
Mhm.
and not, you know, not hustle and hustle in one direction only, right? Like, it's not just about being professionally successful, it's about being personally successful as well. And to lean into that and put a lot of more time into experiences and into relationships, but life experiences. Like I said, like being a successful is not being living a rich life is not about being rich on paper and having money. It's about that's a little bit that's a piece of it. But having a rich life is to have very satiating relationships, experiences, and having other areas where you are successful. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.